Hello and welcome to the show. When it comes to the quest for top speed, certainly in terms of production cars, things have gone quite silly as of late, really. The Bugatti Chiron Supersport did crack the 300 mile an hour mark. I don't know if that's technically an official run, actually. You have to run both ways, and I don't even know if it's technically a production car either, because you have to have so many made, but things have gone silly. The Chiron's getting up towards the 300 mile an hour mark. You have the Hennessy Venom F5, you have the SSC Tarantula, you have, from Koenigsegg, the Jesko. Well, the EXO Absolute would be the one to have ideally. Sadly, we don't have that in Horizon 5. We do have the more normal one, if you can call one of these things normal, and with the upgraded turbos and dumping off of the aero, 300 miles an hour is very possible. You have to do crazy, silly, ridiculous tuning to get the car to do it. It will, just with that. I mean, that's a lot of speed. That is an absolutely ridiculous top speed for the vehicles, you know, to be able to achieve. But it really wasn't all that long ago when 200 miles an hour was the holy grail for a road car. In the end, it was Ferrari that beat that with the F40, and okay, a few years later, it wasn't long before McLaren came along and completely obliterated it with the F1, but still, that 200 mile an hour mark was an impressive goal, which is always a fun little challenge. You see, back in Horizon 4, Jimmy Broadbent set out a challenge to see how cheaply you could build a car to crack 200 miles an hour, and we had a go at it, and I managed to beat it using a Mitsubishi GTO. It's a good, fun little challenge. But what happens if we were to do it on Horizon 5? Because, well, we have different cars. We have different, well, let's say we have different cars. We're going to be using the similar vehicles, but we have different cars, different prices for certain things, and a lot bigger motorway to use this time. Much more helpful for speed running. Let's start with the obvious, okay? This, if you're talking about sort of power for your money, value for money, in terms of a performance car on Forza games, you cannot go wrong with the Monaro. In fact, you can't get really close to this power level for this sort of money. For 25,000 credits, you can get the Monaro VXR. Stock, this has 398 horsepower. Okay, it's not the same as the 1,600 you see from the Jesko, but that is a very, very good amount of power. And when it comes to trying to get a good top speed, it comes to get these high top speeds, we need two things. You need a lot of power, and you need good aerodynamics. Once you start trying to get, you know, the gap between 100 miles an hour, or the jump to go from 100 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour is kind of, you need less power to bridge that gap than from 150 to 200. It gets tougher and tougher to go faster and faster. Now, better aerodynamics help with that one. The stock Monaro, I mean, you know, it's decent aerodynamics, fairly modern car, and a good chunk of power. It's not a bad base to be working on. Like I said, for 25,000 credits, it's very, very good going. Run the vehicle stock, I mean, we're up to 180 miles an hour with the Monaro. That's pretty good going for 25,000 credits, as it's sort of blasting down the motorway. The ultimate sort of part of this, we don't have a perfect controlled environment. The road goes up and down, there are corners to deal with, there is one downhill section after the speed camera, and this is the bit where the cars are going to hit their top speed, basically. It's the best chance they're going to get down here, and sure enough, as we go past the speed camera, we start the slight downhill section. Monaro can push it all the way to 191 miles an hour. This is a completely stock Monaro VXR, 190 miles an hour, 191, fairly straightforward for the car. So it's really close. It's really close to doing it. It's got plenty of sort of gear ratio left, if you like. It's not buzzing the limiter at that point, so it would be, gearing-wise, it would be capable of getting the speed out of this. We weren't going to resort to having sort of a slipstream car. We were going to follow another car. We were going to slipstream behind another car, unless we had to at this point. So it was off to the upgrade shop with the Monaro to tinker around with it. Now, the advantage the Vauxhall has, as you can see, already it's up to 180 miles an hour, is the car's naturally aspirated to begin with, which means you can do a sort of aspiration conversion. You can put on a supercharger or a turbocharger. Now, these give you a lot of power. This car is running 520 horsepower with a supercharger added on. And all that costs was 1,500 credits. It's actually cheaper than the majority of engine upgrades, like decent engine upgrades. So we've got over 120 more horsepower in this from just the supercharger, and the supercharger is incredibly, incredibly cheap. It's easily going to crack the 200 mile an hour mark. I mean, it doesn't need the downhill section. It can be doing the 200 miles an hour uphill. So the Monaro is very, very easily past this. Now, you could argue that you could go and tinker around. There are a few engine upgrades that are cheaper than this. Some of the sort of like the first stage of like street parts and so on can come in at just under about 1,000 credits. So maybe if you get the right one of those, you could get it very close. I mean, this is very common. It's 215 miles an hour. In fact, that's faster than the XJ220 that went and beat the Ferrari. So, yeah, you could maybe tinker around, and if you got really sort of picky with the parts, you could maybe go. But the supercharger's such a cheap upgrade to shove on the car for a huge amount of power. It doesn't quite have as much grip as I was expecting it to have as we came off the end of the motorway. But there we go. So easy to do with the Monaro to get it well and comfortably past the 200 mile an hour mark, and that's 26,500 credits. That's it. That's all it took with the Vauxhall. I mean, the next question was, could I do it for less than that? Because 25,000 credits, I said, great value for the car. You can buy cars for less. With the exception of the DeLorean, which is worth 15,000 credits for whatever reason in the game, everything else, all the other cheapest cars, are valued at 20,000 credits. So that immediately gives you a 5,000 credit advantage over the Vauxhall. Now, the first thing to test is the GTO. This is what I used to beat the Monaro out last time. Because, well, I mean, it's cheaper than the Vauxhall. It's still got a good chunk of power at 320 horsepower. That's not bad. That's not a bad place to start. It's got half-decent aerodynamics. I mean, for the time, the GTO was an incredibly advanced car. It had four-wheel steering and all sorts. It was a very, very technically advanced vehicle. I've always liked the GTOs or the 3000 GT, depending on where you are from. So it went off down the motorway in standard guise. Now, we're not expecting this to hit 200 miles an hour. Of course not. I was curious to see what it could do, and the other thing to bear in mind here is gearing. I can't adjust the gear ratios on these cars. I mean, I can if I buy a gearbox, but I don't want to have to. I want the car to be able to get to 200 miles an hour with the standard gearing, because that's going to make life a lot easier. If we can save the 1,000 or so credits that would be going a gearbox, perfect. The Monaro has no issue with this at all. It could go even faster with the gear ratio it had to start with. This, I mean, we're at 160 or so miles an hour. This was kind of the speed I was expecting to see from this. It's not bad. And once we got to the downhill section, knew it would accelerate a little bit more. We're up to 170 or so miles an hour. You know, not too bad. And we have a sixth gear in the car as well. I presume that would be like a sort of a motorway cruising gear almost in the vehicle. But that's great news. That's what I wanted to see from the GTO. Kind of what I wanted to learn almost from the GTO is we've got that room. If we get more power, it's not going to have a problem with the gearing. Yeah, 170 or so was... That's a solid base to work with. We can get around the corner at 170 or so miles an hour, but yeah, you're not going to be able to pick up any more speed, so that is basically the run done for the car. So, it's off to the upgrade shop for the vehicle. Now, of course, the GTO starts off with turbos, which means we can't do that lovely cheap conversion, which is just the easiest way to go. Now, we can upgrade the turbos, and the thing that we want the most is power. And the turbo upgrade is the most efficient sort of way of gaining power. We get 115 extra horsepower out of this. That is a good chunk of power. Yes, 5,400 credits does use up basically all of the difference between this and the Monaro, but we need more power. If we're going to get the car to be able to do this, it needs as much power as possible. Now, I did also have a little bit of time flicking around to find the other options. Basically, for horsepower-wise, when you've only got less than 1,000 credits to work with, your best bet is the fuel system. The rest of the parts don't give you the same level of power. Now, we're only talking minor, we're only talking 1 or 2 horsepower here, depending on the car and the engine and so on, but 1 or 2 horsepower could make the difference. So, yeah, the fuel system was the upgrade of choice for kind of like just rounding out the rest of the cost, and with the turbo added together with the fuel system, and of course the cost of the car, we came to 26,150. So it is cheaper than the Monaro, And as you can see, it is clearly faster as well. We're up to 183 miles an hour before we get to the camera. There's still plenty of sort of gearing left, and as we run down the hill, it's up to 192, 193 miles an hour. It's very close, but it isn't going to crack the 200 mark. There's no more room for power upgrades in this vehicle. Now, it has got close, and in theory, if it had to slipstream, it had a slipstream car to run behind, I was of the opinion that that would crack the 200 mile an hour mark. I mean, curiously, it's not actually that much faster than the stock Monaro at this point. It is a little bit more, expensive than a stock Monaro. But yeah, it's only a mile an hour or two faster than that. But it got very close. That was well within the reason that a slipstream car would be able to pull it over the 200 mile mark. So I left the GTO for now, thinking we might well come back to that at some point. Now the next contender is the Nissan 300 ZX, and we didn't have we had this in Horizon 4, but it wouldn't have been able to be used for this challenge because it was a Forza-thon playlist car or whatever it was. The car was valued at 250,000 credits, that was just like the default value for a lot of the lower end cars from that. So it kind of didn't really factor in. But in Horizon 5, it isn't one of those cars you can go out and buy it, which means it's now valued at 20,000 credits. So we have got another contender here. Much like the GTO, it's got a good amount of power to begin with. 276 horsepower. It's not quite as much as the Mitsubishi. I was hoping that this would be perhaps a little bit more aerodynamic, a little bit more streamlined. So perhaps we'd have a little less resistance from this. And I mean, this is a solid choice of car. There is a couple of downside. Well, let's say one big downside really is the gears. It doesn't have 6 gears like the GTO, and it's getting close to the limit in fifth as stock guys, up to 172 miles an hour. So we're around a similar level that we saw from the GTO, but that's getting close to the red line. That's bad because that means even if we have the power to propel the car up towards the 200 mile an hour mark, we're going to potentially run out of gears. So the car was upgraded. It was exactly the same thing done with this. Again, the 300ZX, also a twin-turbo engine from standard. The turbos were upgraded along with the street fuel system. That gives us 375 horsepower in this car. So it has got less power than the GTO, but clearly is a little bit better in terms of aerodynamics. And running in this guise, we're up to 185. As we run down the hill, we clear 188 miles an hour. It's close. It's not quite as fast as the GTO, but it's very close. The big concern is, as you can see, it's right near the red line. Now, I don't know if it could physically hit 200 miles an hour with that gearbox in the vehicle. It's so tantalizingly close to buzzing the limiter. Again, there was another vehicle that, with a slipstream through that part, might just be capable. I mean, price is the same as we saw from the GTO, so both those cars, 26,150 credits, and they were running just shy of that 200 mile an hour mark. But there is a third contender that I hadn't really thought about when setting out to do this video, the Celica GT4. I only really spotted this car because I was flicking through the the list of cars, sort of the budget end, if you like, and the Celica came up with quite a high top speed stat, which did surprise me. I think it was 6.1. I don't often use these stats, but it was just a cursory look, and the Celica's was high, the 6.1. That's not far off the GTO and the 300ZX, which did surprise me because stock has only got 255 horsepower. I say only, but we're talking about 320 horsepower in the GTO. Okay, we're maybe only 20 down on the 300ZX, but I didn't think this was going to be as aerodynamic as the Nissan. I never really considered this car beforehand, but I thought, you know what, screw it. We'll give it a go. We'll run the vehicle. We'll see what happens. So, send it out in stock. Guys, problem number one that we hit is it basically gets to the limiter. We're at 170 and it's pretty much buried itself in the limiter. That is a big problem because it doesn't matter what power I put in the car, we're going to get stuck there. Speed-wise is good though. That's around the speed that we'd seen from the other vehicles. that is helpful. that is what we were wanting to see from this car. Now, I should say, the Celica can't be bought from the auto show. This is one of the playlist cars. However, Horizon 5 has a much better, more sensible system, and this car here is valued in the garage at 20,000 credits. The reason why I got very interested in this car is I can take off the rear wing. And in Horizon 5, this has a really big difference on top speed. Aerodynamics plays a much bigger part in top speed. I mean, this got up to 100... Well, it jumped the top speed up a bit, but we know it's going to be gear limited, essentially. So I was contemplating what else I could do. The taking off the wing costs 1,000 credits, and I have to get a gearbox. It's no good running the car with a standard gearbox, because we're basically at the limit of what the gearing can do, rather than what the car does. So I've got to spend, annoyingly, 1,600 credits on the gearbox. Now, I want the cheapest option here. I want to spend as little money, but I have to be able to adjust the gear ratios on this car. So the gearbox has got to go in. And then when you add that together, the cost of the turbo puts it over the cost of the Monaro and over the cost of the other cars. So the next sort of biggest power gain can come from the camshafts. It's expensive-ish at 3,000 credits, but, you know, it's kind of what you've got to go and do with the vehicle if you want it. So at this point, the car was running at 25,600 credits, and that still gave me some money to play with if I wanted to go and beat the Monaro. So it was off to go and grab the street fuel system, my favourite one, and that put the estimated speed up at 189 miles an hour. Now that was before the gearbox was tuned as well. That was with the upgraded gearbox just set on its default. So total cost of all of this lot was 26,350. Cheaper than the Monaro. It is a little bit more than the 300ZX and that of the GTO, but they hadn't cracked 200 miles an hour unassisted. As I said, I think they could do with the tow, but they hadn't cracked it unassisted. So we go off into the upgrade, and even the benchmark at this point reckoned the car could do 200. That's good. Benchmark is fairly accurate on Horizon 5. Often with this, I was able to beat it because I was going downhill. As I say, we were using that little section where we could just slightly extend it. I mean, sure enough, the Toyota was powering along. I mean, up to 193 miles an hour here, so it's already quicker than we saw from... This is actually now starting to going uphill here. It's quicker than the Mitsubishi and the Nissan at this stage. So, simply taking off the rear wing of this car, you've got to bear in mind, this modified is putting out 290 horsepower. That's it. That's all it's putting out, compared to the 440 that the Mitsubishi was. And once we get over the crest here, it is easily past 200 miles an hour. It had done it. It was up, in fact, it got up to 206 miles an hour by the end. That impressed me. No, not going to lie. That was very, very impressive from the Celica. I did not expect it to be able to achieve that. And then this got me thinking, well, we've beaten the 200 mile an hour mark, but can we do it for less money? We beat it quite comfortably at the end of the day. So, I have to go and adjust the setup, adjust the build of the car, if you like. The wing coming off is absolute, has to be done. That's the 1,000 credits. The gearbox absolutely has to be done. Those two things cannot be... Well, I mean, the wing doesn't technically have to, but the top speed gain from the wing is immense. So it's the most cost-effective one. So we get rid of the fuel system. We don't need that. It's still estimated at 98.8 or something. So it was close enough. So it's then through the camshaft. What one would we reckon it would be close enough to doing? And I figured the stage 2 of the camshaft. Now, and I wanted to do this unassisted without that slipstream car if I could. So, you know, we still do need to have enough power to make this work, so we went for the second stage of camshafts, which, when all put together, meant this car cost 24,600 credits. Now, the thing that matters here is if this car can hit 200 miles an hour, unassisted, it does it for cheaper than a stock Monaro. It is faster than the stock Monaro, so it doesn't matter what you do with the Monaro, it's never beating the Celica here. And sure enough, as we're running along, it's doing well. Okay, we have a random where the BMW turns up, but it's already up to 190 miles an hour. So it's faster at this stage than any of the other vehicles have been. It's going up the hill and it's holding that 190 miles an hour. It goes to show just how significant the aero was, and you might be saying, why don't I take the wing off the GTO and so on? I can't. There wasn't an option to do that. I looked, but you couldn't take the wing off the GTO or the 300ZX. But because you could on this one, as we go past the speed camera at 192, we start going downhill. The car is powering its way to 199 and hits the 200 mile an hour mark, and it does it. I don't think you get away with the lower tier of camshaft because that literally just hits it, and it is only just gets the 200 mile an hour mark, but it did it. The Celica cracked 200 miles an hour for 24,600 credits. That is ridiculous. That is incredible. As I said, beating the Monaro, I feel, is possible for less. If we take the Celica out of consideration, beating the Monaro is possible for less if you had a car to tow you down the motorway, but the Celica doesn't need that. It didn't need a car to tow it down the motorway. It was able to do it on its own. It's all to do with the wing. It's all to do with the air. In the end, it was the aerodynamics. It wasn't brute force that did it. It was the ability to take off the wing, and the difference that makes to the top speed of the car is how the Celica did it. It's 290 horsepower is all it took for that car to hit 200 miles an hour. That's also a seriously impressive feat, to have been able to do that with that little amount of power. Now, for a bit of fun, I decided to go on the auction house and have a look and see what I could do there. And we were dealing with cars bought from the game and that sort of basic valuation, if you like. I thought I'd go have some fun, go on the auction house, see what I could get. For 4,000 credits, I managed to get an S1 class Corvette, which, I mean, is always going to be quick. Yes, you know, it doesn't really count. I had a bit of a flick through. I found the first thing that looked like it was going to be a power monster and be able to run it. This Corvette, the previous owner, had tried to make into a drift car. I was concerned the gear ratios might be very silly when I noticed it was on drift suspension and drift tyres. I wondered, you know, if they had tried shooting it for drifting or whatever. It does slide around quite nicely. Yeah, that was the concern. It was going to end up sort of buzzing a limiter if it had been really shortened or have really weird, horrific handling characteristics. But no, there wasn't really any problem with the vehicle. It could slide around, but it didn't really drive particularly badly. I mean, as you can see, hitting 200 miles an hour was not going to be a problem for this one. In fact, we're well past that as it barrels its way along to 230, and it's still got another gear to go at this point. So, yeah, okay, for 4,000 credits, you've got this Corvette that is an absolute monster, and in fact, by the time you get up towards the speed camera, you're running 260 miles an hour plus, which is pretty good. 265, I think we top out at, yeah. It doesn't really count, though. It doesn't really count being an auction house car, but if you do want to go very fast for very little money, that is a way to go with it. You can get all sorts of weird and wonderful things on the auction house for rather cheap. I didn't really get the drift right coming off the motorway. I made a bit of a hash of it. I thought I'd try and drift it as it wanted, you know, being a drift car and drift tyres and all that, but didn't really get it right. So I ended up just making a mess. But yeah, 260, easy. So, yeah, there we go. The cheapest I could get a car to hit that 200 mile an hour mark, 24,600 credits, and really not the car that I thought it would be. As I said, it all came down to the aerodynamics at the moment. I have no doubt if I could take the wing off the GTO, we could probably do a similar thing. Because the ring removal made such a big difference to the top speed. That made a bigger difference to the top speed than the turbo upgrades, pretty much. So, yeah, that's very, very powerful. This was fun, though. As I said, this was fun. I enjoyed it, and not only that, I got a result I really, really didn't expect when I started out. And that's always a bonus. I always like it when we get weird, unexpected results. But, there we go. That is going to be it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.